Hi everyone, it's Elizabeth here. So I wanted to do this video, kind of a message for spiritual millennials. You don't have to be a millennial. You can be of any generation to listen to this video. But answering this question, are you being called to heal your ancestral trauma and kind of change your ancestral DNA? So I believe in balancing a world of logic and spirit. A lot of people tend to live in one or the other. A lot of people tend to say like all science is fake. And, a lot of scientific atheist people tend to believe that people who are spiritual are just kind of crazy, or, they're like, it's 2019. How the hell can they still believe in this stuff? Like it's old things from the past. So through our ancestors, we've come to know that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So our human body is the vehicle that is carrying our soul throughout our life experience here. And a lot of the purpose of life is, as I've explained in other videos, is to learn how to love and how to forgive. I mean, the reality is our soul is trying to find its way home, which is up in the ethers, the heavens, the other dimensions, whatever belief system you want to call it. We are here to try to find our way home, but also grow our soul through meeting people and having various life experiences. We are given free will. I do believe that we all have some sort of fate or destiny, but we are given free will and the opportunity to kind of choose and or possibly minorly manipulate this, or kind of find detours that will still help us get to the end point of where we're trying to go in our life. So throughout my time of spiritual journeying, I guess it's been about 14 years of doing this. I've spent a lot of time in the energetic world with Eastern mysticism. Now I'm more as like a Christian mystic at this point in my life. So years ago, I felt like I was here for many reasons, but one of the reasons why I believe that my soul incarnated into my family was to stop the patterning of my family, as well as to change kind of our ancestral DNA. So you have DNA. We know about this from a scientific standpoint, and then, through things like epigenetics, which is trying to change your genetics. And a lot of people are very fascinated through DNA manipulation to try to change, like health behavior patterns. So you can be thin and whatever, or, now you're kind of able to kind of socially engineer building a child. Like if you want the child to have blue eyes and be athletic, like, science is finding a way to manipulate that. That stuff freaks me out. But here's the thing. We have had generations of massive amounts of trauma in our lifetime. Specifically, I'm talking about in the United States, because I live here. If you look at the last 100 years of existence, from 2019 to 1919, back it up a few years, you're looking at from World War I to present day. There is so much stuff that has happened from the early 1900s through today. The 1900s had a lot of issues. Think about the type of generation that had to live. You lived through World War I, then you lived through a form of that depression, depending on what part of the globe you were in, and then you had to live through World War II, and then communism happened after that in Europe. And it's quite amazing. Like my great-grandmother and great-grandfather survived World War II. He fought for the Polish army. They were also in displacement camps. They were sent throughout places in Europe and taken from their farm from the Ukraine. And so why I share that story is my great-grandmother was born in 1920, and my great-grandfather's birthday was November 11th of 1911, so 11/11/11. And that, whole story in itself is so fascinating, and they were both really strong individuals. I've never met my great-grandfather, but my great-grandmother passed away in 2012 at 92, and so I learned a lot from her. But if you were born in 1920 in the Ukraine, you survived the Stalin grain drain from the late 1920s, and then you had to go into World War II, and then eventually uprooting your whole life to move to another country. That is a lot of stuff that happens. has happened into someone's life, and a lot of emotional trauma that hasn't been dealt with. So why I kind of catered this video more to spiritual millennials is because I do think millennials are trying to kind of discover themselves. Living in America today, it is not stigmatized to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or to get help for your issues. We had years ago, for a long time, we've had Alcoholics Anonymous, and now there's all these different types of AA groups for different areas, like for porn addicts and sex love addiction addicts, and also for drug addicts. So there are a lot of support systems in this country, and I currently live in Seattle, where it is so open and accepting to have a counselor. To some degree, it's actually interesting because I've met people who've moved out here from other parts of America, and they're like, Jesus, I've never met so many people who have like a therapist and a counselor. So it's like, why is that? Are we too sensitive out here to where we can't have a strong enough backbone to kind of solve our shit? Or is it because it is so accepted that people are more open and honest about seeing a psychiatrist or having some form of a therapist or a life coach and things like that? So there's a balance to the two. But the point and the purpose that I want to get to this video is that when I discovered this many, many years ago, kind of around the time I studied Reiki, I not only looked at my immediate family's patterning, but I looked at the extended family. And I think that's something that maybe you should do as well. Look at how you were raised, look at your parents and your grandparents if you knew them, but also look at your extended family, look at your cousin's life, look at your aunt and uncle's life. Me and my former husband, we both went through a lot of shit with our family. And my ex-husband, they had more of like this religious zealotry from being Jehovah, where it's like even his extended family was on the receiving end of a lot of neglect or abuse because people just didn't want to be a part of that religion, and then they rebelled and went really, really crazy. But, I looked at my extended family, and we have a lot of, infidelity, a lot of divorce, a lot of domestic violence. It's really, really sad. And so I believe that depending on where you come from, you either repeat your family's same patterns or you break through the patterns. So if you find yourself starting to repeat your family's history or follow the same footsteps as your mother or father, especially if that's in a negative light, you have to take a step back and think about, okay, what is this that I want to change in my life, but also in the DNA. So what they're finding now, which is kind of this mix of science and spirit, is that they're finding that trauma is in the DNA and the biology of us, and it's also passed down through the generations. So if you start to look at your generation of your family's, say, behavior, so if one person is an alcoholic, say the grandfather's the alcoholic, maybe the father was the alcoholic, and now you notice that you're becoming an alcoholic, there's something in that gene. Even something like anger and rage. Think about that. If, say, someone's father was abusive or had anger and rage issues, most likely you're going to have that as well. I've seen that in myself as well as in my family. There is, a lot of yoga and meditation. People meet me today, they're like, you're so zen. And it's like I had all this, like, I'm an Aquarius. Aquarius rules kind of anger to some degree, and a lot of mental energy that had to get transmuted out through athletics or through some sort of artistic pursuit, because at some points it's like fireworks just blowing off in the brain. And, when you look at that and you come to some points of like self-actualization, it's like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be impulsive and, just kind of spew out a bunch of stuff and react impulsively. Like, I want to work on that. And that's a huge reason why, I guess I'm sharing this example of how I ended up getting into like yoga and meditation and just trying to like control. I'm a Virgo moon, so that's like neurotic in itself, with like always worrying and future tripping and stuff like that. It's like, what's going to happen in the future? It's just like I wasn't ever in the present. I was always somewhere else. So if you start to feel like you want to heal this stuff, you have to look at the patterns and understand how to change these behavioral patterns. We are set up with so many tools today, with the online world, with therapy, with support groups and meetup groups and counseling that there really are no excuses anymore. The only excuse that we can have is like we don't have time because we're working like a dog, or we just don't have money because certain things are so expensive. You don't have to go to an energy healer to deal with this, although that might not necessarily be a bad idea. You can start to develop yourself internally, as well as developing your spirituality. I've, come full circle. I know a lot of Christians are like, they automatically push the Bible out to people and say, follow Jesus. And although I do think Jesus was the ultimate light being on this planet, he was the most healing man that has ever walked this earth, that I just don't believe in shoving that into people's face. I think, like, everyone's soul is here on a path, and maybe you're not ready for that type of a step, especially because a lot of people in our country have come from very bad experiences due to organized religion, which has really messed up a lot of the understanding of faith-based Christianity. So here are some things that you can start to look at to see, like, does my family's lineage need help? One is something like physical health changes. This is something I believe that has been so socially engineered. When you look at the birth of television and, the TV dinner culture that started in the 50s, you notice that a lot of people who were born, a lot of baby boomers born, are now very obese nowadays, but they also bred their DNA from being obese into their future generations. So if you were born into a family of obesity, it is very likely that you will be obese as an adult. In addition, it's really hard to change those behaviors, the eating style and the health behaviors, the older you get. So you have to start to look at how can you break out through this. You can go through a dietitian, personal training, health coaching. That's an easy shift. Another one is looking at your family's financial situation. There has been research about this for so long that says if you were born poor, generally you're kind of stuck in this poverty cycle. A lot of people end up being stuck in a poverty cycle because they're also in a scarcity mindset rather than being in an abundant mindset. So a lot of this work is to educate yourself and understand how to be financially fit. You can seek financial counseling. You could go somewhere like TD Ameritrade and take a class or talk to a financial advisor on how to invest your money properly. So these are the things in terms of any form of counseling for your financial well-being, that you can start to understand how money works and operates in a healthy manner, and how to better budget. I'm sorry, I hate saying this. A lot of Americans do bitch and complain about how poor we are, and life is getting really, really expensive, but we are also a very highly driven consumeristic culture. I live in Seattle. I make like a third of what these tech people make, and I'm still able to do it. It's because I cook my own food. I take the bus or I walk to work. It's like I don't live a life in luxury. I drive when I go out, or I take the bus. It's like I'm not taking constant Ubers. I don't like spending my money on alcohol. So if I go out, I either don't drink or I might have one. Spending my money on gluttony, I'm not a fan of it. So getting financially fit, if your family is poor and you're poor, that poverty cycle is probably going to continue until you look at it. Now, there could be issues to cure in terms of religion or limitations or belief systems, curses, whatever you'd like to think. Some of this might have to do with your self-esteem. Some of this might have to do with healing from religious zealotry. If you're looking at certain patterns in family behavior, whether that is abuse or anger, or, maybe the men are very violent toward the females, sexual abuse and things like that. These are things that you really need to seek some sort of therapy on to kind of help break these limitations and or certain religious upbringings that really damaged your mind, body, and soul. So you can kind of break the links from the past that are holding you back so you can move forward in this lifetime feeling more whole and complete and loved from a more positive way and manner. Career limits can be broken. So, for example, you can educate yourself, even if it's going and getting a certificate or an associate's degree. I will share this. My ex-husband comes from a lower middle class family from Ohio, whose family basically was more or less like blue-collared souls, let's put it that way. And he was the first person kind of in his immediate genetic lineage to go to college. I'm talking about in his like immediate family. I'm not talking about extended because his cousins and stuff went to school as well, but or at least one of them did, if I remember correctly. So, you know, if you come from a family that isn't educated, you can break that ancestral lineage just by going out and getting some sort of certificate. Even if it's going, you know, say you want to become a massage therapist and you educate yourself with a 10-month massage therapy degree, like that's great. You don't always have to have a 4-year program in order to kind of break that cycle. So career limitations, you know, if you come from, you see this a lot, like small town people, you know, it's like, oh, if I stayed here, I'd probably just work at the gas station. Sometimes people want more, and there are souls that crave more, and maybe that's the reason why you were born into your family, was so you can break that cycle. Relationship issues. So it kind of goes a little bit with what I just explained, but this is dealing with stuff like lack of love, violence in relationships, broken marriages or partnerships, loneliness, a lack of self-love and self-worth. These are things that can be aided with counseling, therapy, energy healing, self-help courses, psychological counseling. There are so many things out there, and I do believe one of the biggest relationships that you can build is with God. If you're not comfortable using that word, you can say the divine or the source, whatever. When I was younger, I used the word source and divine. I'm comfortable enough in my life right now to use the word God. I think that's the biggest relationship that you can build, because the reality is that God wants what is best for you. And when you develop that relationship, you can start to ask questions and ask God, please guide me. How can I improve this, that, or the other? Guide me on where I need to go. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we're just living in an era. It is a new shift. I mean, we are entering a new paradigm. I do believe in the astrological ages. So we've shifted from the age of Pisces. We're transiting into the age of Aquarius. I don't think we're fully blown into that yet. But the one thing I do think is that we're not bounded to beliefs of the past. And I think we're finding that. The one positive thing, there's so much shit happening in modern society. It freaks me out. I'm not happy about it at all. I think too much break away from the tradition and the family nucleus is very scary. I believe decadence and destruction are sisters. When society starts getting debaucherous, that's when things start to fall. The Roman Empire fell. And that was the biggest empire that's ever lived on this planet. And you look at how debaucherous they were and how much like infidelity and, you know, violence that was going on. Eventually it's going to fall. It'll succeed. It'll hit its peak and then it'll fail, you know, peaks and valleys. So, but the one thing today, I think we're just understanding how DNA heritage easily has affected our belief systems, has affected our lifestyles here on this planet, and it's really, really important to change this. If we can't just have like 4 great cities in America and then the rest of the country is broken. That's not how this works. This country is a whole unit of systems. I get so frustrated out here in the West Coast because all the energy healers and spiritual people have left Seattle because the tech industry moved in and completely changed the culture. And then you have like all these Bay people coming up with their disgusting attitude and their belief systems, which is, you know, a lot of like very logical kind of atheist standpoints. And it's like, what are we going to do? Just keep moving on to like other places and pushing out other people? Like, these places that are suffering have to change, and a lot of very, very old and strong souls are being born or have been born into some really tough situations. And I believe it is, one, because the soul needs to experience this to grow, but also to break that lineage, whether it is getting the education or overcoming abuse. If you were, sexually abused as a child, like, I don't know, maybe if you heal from that, one of your life missions is to have a family that is completely different from the way you grew up and expresses the utmost love. I remember when I was younger, like, I know my ex-husband always wanted children, and I think part of us were kind of like a little nervous because we're like, oh man, like we both, had some shit happen in our days, and there was that fear base. It's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't, the world's too populated. And then it's like, you know what, once you get a little older, a little wiser, you're like, wow, maybe the one thing that I could do on this planet is to create a very healthy household so our future generations are happy, healthy, and left in a better position than the past. So yeah, anyways, these are some thoughts that I have. You can read a lot of stuff online about the epigenetics of our DNA. This is something the fitness industry is really even looking into. I don't really know if I'm a huge fan of manipulating DNA from like a scientific standpoint. I just believe that we can change this spiritually. So we can spiritually change our DNA. We can affect our heritage. So we can start to move past either indoctrination, move past abuse, move past anything that has kept us back. And I look at things in my life, and a lot of my friends, I just thought about this like yesterday. A lot of my friends and closest people, or the people who are most empathetic or the most sincere in terms of like friendship or understanding humans, have come from the most broken situations. They've had childhood trauma or family issues and things like that. And it's kind of the people who suffer the most understand what is most important in life. So these are some thoughts that I have. If you have any thoughts about this, I would love to hear it. So if you are, I just encourage people not to waste their spiritual gifts. Your spiritual gift is here for a reason. We all have free will to exercise our spirit, our body, and our mind. If people could pull back away from social media and Facebook and all the time that they spend in, consumeristic pursuits, and actually put forth energy toward, healing themselves, the planet, their ancestral DNA, like, we could live, maybe that utopia can exist. It's, but we can't do it when we're constantly just wrapped up in worldly desires. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. All right, thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. If you can subscribe to this channel, you can help me build it. Thank you so much, and see you guys soon. Bye.